Warm greetings to all of you. Hello there, I am Suhaila Abdul Hamid, your lecturer for today. Today, we are going to discuss about environmental risk assessment, or in short called as ERA. This topic is the second topic in Environmental Management course SBEV 3103. Let me introduce to all of you the learning outcomes for today. At the end of this lecture, all of you are able to define the term environmental risk, relate natural disasters and human-induced activities to environmental risk, conduct environmental risk assessment, and identify factors influencing risk management. Dear students, before we proceed further, let us review the previous session that we had last week. In topic 1, we have discussed on what is sustainable development. As we all know, sustainable development is a development that meets the needs of present generation without compromising the needs of future generation. Next, we also covers on the Earth ecosystem, which comprises of atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere. We also look into the ecosystem services, the level of organization in the ecosystem, the environmental degradation issues, and who manages the environment in Malaysia. Now, let us begin our today's session. In our daily activities, we are exposed to a certain amount of risk. What is risk? According to ISO 31000, risk is an effect of uncertainty on objectives. There are two types of risks, which are voluntary risk and involuntary risk. Let me explain further. Voluntary risk refers to risks that humans are willing to take. To a certain degree when involved in known activities. For example, riding a bicycle, driving a car, and also having recreational activity. On the other hand, involuntary risk happen when events or activities are beyond human control and cannot be accepted. For examples, haze, flood, and dry season. As we are discussing in the environmental context, thus, what is environmental risk? Environmental risk can be defined as the actual or potential threat of adverse effects on living organisms and the environment by effluents, emissions, waste, resource depletion, etc., arising out of an organization's activities. Examples of environmental risks are soil degradation, deforestation, inadequate waste and sewerage disposal, destruction of fauna, oil pollution, and others. Everyone has the right to an environment that is not harmful to health or well-being. An important component of ensuring a healthy environment is by understanding of the impact of human activities on the human health as well as on the environment. Hence, environmental risk assessment is very crucial to be conducted before the commencement of any industrial activity to minimize the environmental risk associated with the operations. Environmental risk assessment is the evaluation of scientific information on the hazardous properties of environmental agent, the dose-response relationship, and the extent of human exposure to those agents. The keywords of ERA are environmental agents, dose-response relationship, and the extent of human exposure to those agents. Examples of environmental agents are as following: chemical, biologic, and physical. Chemicals such as air pollutants, toxic waste, pesticides, and volatile organic compounds able to pollute the environment, as well as the biologic agents such as disease organisms present in food and water, insect and animal allergens. Physical, such as noise, ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. Next, what is a dose-response relationship? A dose-response relationship describes how the likelihood and severity of adverse health effects or the responses are related to the amount and condition of exposure to an agent based on the dose provided. Now, we move into steps involved in the risk assessment. There are 3 steps in any risk assessment activity as follows: hazard identification, dose response assessment, and exposure assessment. Let me explain one by one to all of you. Hazard identification is an assessment through scientific methods where evidence is gathered to find out the causal relationship between exposure of the pollutant and human health. Dose-response assessment is an assessment to quantify the relationship between dosage of contaminant and the reactions it has on human health, while exposure assessment is a measurement of magnitude, frequency, and duration of exposure, as well as the pathways or routes and the sensitive groups among the population. By now, we have already understand on the definition of environmental risk and the relationship between natural disasters and human-induced activities to environmental risk. Let us move into the process in conducting environmental risk assessment. But before that, let me explain the aim of environmental risk assessment. Environmental risk assessment was designed to enable risk managers make informed environmental decisions. It will allow decision makers to determine the actions needed to minimize or eliminate risk. It is commonly used approach in examining environmental problems and to examine risks of every different natures. There are 3 phases in conducting an environmental risk assessment. Phase 1 is the problem formulation and involves 5 main steps as follows: beginning a dialogue between risk managers and risk assessors, selecting assessment endpoints and determining what is important. Thirdly, evaluating goals by risk assessors, preparing the conceptual model, and finally, developing an analysis plan. Problem formulation is addressing question of what needs to be assessed. Phase 2 is the analysis phase, which include the following analysis of ecosystem characterization, stressor characteristics and evaluation of relevant effects, exposure analysis, ecological response analysis, and stressor response analysis. Analysis phase focuses on exposure assessment and effect assessment. It addresses these questions. What are the health problems at different exposures? How much of the pollutant are people exposed to during a specific time period? And how many people are exposed? Lastly, phase 3 is risk characterization, which composes of two parts: risk estimation and risk description. The goal of risk characterization is to provide an understanding of the type and magnitude of an adverse effect that a particular chemical or emission could cause under particular circumstances. Once the risk is already characterized, the risk management strategies are chosen to manage the environmental risk. According to the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, or in short DEFRA, UK, there are 5 risk management strategies to choose from: terminate, mitigate, transfer, exploit, and accept. Terminate basically is to eliminate the source of risk where possible. Mitigate the effects by improving environmental management techniques or using any engineered systems. Transfer the risk through new technology, procedures, or investment. Exploit the risk by having the potential benefit of the risk, embracing the new opportunities, and finally, accept the risk by not intervening with new or existing situations. Finally, we come to our last learning outcome, which is to discuss on factors influencing risk management. Environmental risk assessment and management should not be isolated from other existing activities. Some consideration should be given to risk assessment and risk management. Time and space dependency, difference in perception and understanding, compliance with various legal requirements, and effects on financial commitment. In summary, environmental risk assessment is very important in ensuring effective management of environmental issues in any organization. The outcome of environmental risk assessment will provide information for employers to make decisions to either eliminate or minimize the environmental risk and thus contribute to the achievement of sustainable development and quality of life.